Hello, assalamu alaikum to everyone joining today's virtual conference, virtual roundtable rather, called Rebuilding a Greener, More Inclusive and Prosperous Recovery in Pakistan. This roundtable is a collaborative initiative with the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business. They are part of the Pakistan Business Council, and we'll hear from them in a second. We also have with us the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance. They're another collaborator with us, and we'll hear from their leadership in a second. All three organizations, let me share with you, are non-profit, and they're all registered in Pakistan under Section 42, so we're all non-profit. So that means our agendas in terms of adding public value, in terms of adding value to the business community, are quite shared. So we have very shared values in this entire environmental and social and governance agenda. You know, the prosperity of the people of Pakistan is very much linked to economic growth, and we tend to hear that quite often, that is linked to GDP. But apart from that, the private and public sector operations have to minimize the impact on the environment as they grow, and they also have to maximize their social impact. And by social impact, you know, that's the widest possible definition of that. And throughout that ES and growth-driven agenda, we have to be steered by a governance model that is transparent, that is honest, and that is accountable to the public, to customers, to employees, and to regulators as well. So, you know, that's the purpose of this, and it's come at a very timely moment, this particular event, because we are coming out. We're not out of it yet, out of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Parts of our economy are beginning to open up, but as they begin to open up, and there may be a wish and a desire to press the gas on economic recovery only and sacrifice the environmental and social and governance pieces. And we want to make sure that we avoid that, and how we're going to do that, when and who's going to be responsible, will be some of the areas covered. Let me quickly hand over to Hassan, who can introduce PBC and SERB, and then we'll follow that by Essen to introduce PICG. Over to you, Hassan.
Okay, so thank you very much, Arif. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. Very quickly, Pakistan Business Council is a think tank and a business advocacy body. We are not a chamber of commerce, and we don't issue visa letters or endorse certificates of origin or do any of those very exciting things. I think they're very important. However, what we focus on are identifying the gaps in the policy framework in order to promote growth. And our main stakeholder, obviously, is the government of Pakistan, but we work through multilaterals and so on. We're very fortunate that in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen our membership double. And now we have the who's who of Pakistan's corporate world that belongs to the Pakistan Business Council. Because we have very responsible and because we have very large and successful businesses that belong to us, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that some of the practices that these businesses follow, and indeed some of the practices that the more successful businesses follow across the world, are assembled and then are shared with the not as big businesses, but businesses that are beginning to realize the necessity to operate in a responsible manner. So about 4 years ago, we set up a Center of Excellence in Responsible Business, which now has about 6 or 7 full-time staff, and they focus full-time on matters such as gender inclusivity, responsibility towards the environment, responsibility within the extended value chain in terms of employment security, creating employment security, and so on. So this is what the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business does. And I think I'll just stop at that. And I think, allow others to introduce, and then perhaps we can come back and talk about the subject at hand. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So hello. So I'm representing the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance. I must tell you that I've just joined them literally a month ago. And the institute is charged with promoting good corporate governance practices in Pakistan. It is a not-for-profit, as Arif mentioned. So good corporate governance, as we see it at PICG, is an essential prerequisite for building the integrity and credibility of the financial institutions, stock exchange, and other incorporated companies, and the whole market economy as a whole. So, the whole idea of how good governance and transparency can help create that confidence is what PICG's larger purpose is. And what we principally have been doing, we've been around for the last 15 years, and is really been providing training and education to directors, and one of the directors training program has been a flagship part of what PICG has been able to do, is to influence the thinking on so many boards of listed companies, private companies, and NGOs. And in fact, one of the former CEOs of PICG is now the person heading up SERB at BBC. And so we, can see how a lot of very good work emerging out of PICG is now taking root in lots of other organizations and being done remarkably well. So we're really happy to be partnering here with ACCA and SERB to align and build partnerships to collaborate on an important subject that we're going to be talking more about in due course. So I'll also just stop here and be happy to speak to the subject matter when we go around. Thank you.
Great. I'm just going to hand over back to Rachel Johnson, who's the Head of Risk and Corporate Governance at ACCA, and she can now introduce Hamad and do the next steps of the moderation. Over to you, Rachel.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm really excited to introduce you to Hamad. He works for the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Pakistan, and I've already had the privilege of hearing lots of thoughts and learn about some of the initiatives they've been working on in Pakistan. So over to you, Hamad.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be present in this session. Let me say at the onset that we need to treat this present crisis caused by COVID-19 as a wake-up call. This is not just a public health crisis. This is a financial crisis. This is economic crisis. This is a social crisis. This is a environmental crisis. Such pandemics have happened in the past, so this is not for the first time. And unfortunately, looking at the development around us, I don't think that this would be the last time. So the thing is that this has also demonstrated that we have broken our relationship with nature. So there's an urgency to mend that relationship. And looking at the topic under discussion, that the kind of green and just recovery which is required. So let me try to set the stage for our follow-up discussions. I think everybody has to play his or her role, but let me just focus on three major sectors: the government, the financial institutes, and the private sector. Governments in any geography, they set the rules and regulations, the policy framework, incentives, subsidies, just to promote economic development, economic growth. So it's very important that there should be a compliance of that policy and regulatory framework. We all know the status of compliance in a country like Pakistan. You take any act, rule, law related to environment, and you'll see that except for the few multinationals and the industry who are export-oriented industry, we see a very poor compliance. So what is the next step? The next is the voluntary, initiatives. This could be where the industries, private sector come forward as the champion, or maybe as part of their stewardship role. There are few industries who, as part of the CSR, they feel that it's their responsibility to go beyond compliance. And we have seen good examples also. It's not, that everything is bad in this country. We do witness some very good examples. Now, for the private sector, the compliance is the bare minimum. That's the first step. And we are talking about even going beyond the first step. But let me also just quickly share my thoughts on subsidies. We have seen in the past that government always extends, subsidies or incentives to promote a certain sector or to promote economic growth in general. Most of the time, those subsidies, they're like kind of brown subsidies. We have seldom seen green subsidies. So I think as the way forward, it's also important to have green subsidies. Now, coming to the private sector, the first is that, okay, we need to, do compliance. But I think, again, going beyond that, it's not about the nature positive activities. That's the ideal. You need to reduce your footprint, you become neutral, but going beyond where you are a nature positive. So you are even contributing in a positive manner instead of, making your footprint bigger and bigger and bigger. You have first become neutral and then, make. The second is, as the country, we have this energy crisis. So I think the transition requires that there should be low carbon transition, renewables, instead of, again, going for kind of coal-fired power plants or technologies which are obsolete, polluting, and are being kind of, not utilized in the developed world. Now, let me also now come to financial institutes. Now, some of the international DFIs or some of the progressive financial mechanism, they have ESGs in place. They ensure that before making any financial decision, they ensure that proper compliance, at least, is made. So they ensure that social and environmental impact assessments are properly done, comprehensively, independently, in a transparent manner, and then they make their financial decisions. I think it's the point that I'm trying to make is that resilience and sustainability, they must be a central part to any recovery package and any financial decision. So the first one was related to where ensuring that the compliance and the proper homework which is required by the law is done before making any financial decision. And second, maybe becoming a more proactive in the sense which is green financing. So maybe there are industries who want funds to reduce their footprint or to improve their environmental performance. Sometimes they struggle to get money to make that kind of investment because there are not many instruments which are available to fund such. So I think that's also where, if you really want to have green recovery, if you really want to have an inclusive, just recovery, there should be a mechanism where subsidies, the green subsidies, and also the support from the financial institutes are there. I think I'll stop there, and then maybe once the debate goes on, I'll try to chip in. Thank you.
Okay, so I take it I'm meant to go second. So yeah, okay. So adding to what Hamad is saying, and some of his points, there will be some overlap, but I guess for me, it's important to frame the context also because I'm of the view that there is a very low degree of awareness in our society, and even amongst our corporates, if there's some level of understanding, it's at a superficial level, and how deeply understood is the challenge and the reality of our problems. So I would say, these are the best of times and these are the worst of times, as has been written by Dickens. I mean, the COVID devastation on lives, on mental health, the economy has been enormous, and certainly in some ways, as Arundhati Roy says, it's a real rupture with the past. And in that, I feel like there might be the best of times, because the world has been forced to reflect and think about this doomsday machine kind of thing, as she describes it, that we've created. And the mega trends that I think Arif had been talking about, whether it's global warming or whether it's water scarcity, or is it the income inequality, poverty, etc., that continues to be confronting the world, and yet there seems to be very minimal or real thinking around it, especially in Pakistan. And so, as the saying goes, nothing focuses the mind like when you know you're going to hang in the morning. So I think there is a real sense of denial that we've sort of hit up against, and this whole idea of what we can't see or experience isn't real is really crept through this experience of COVID. And as Hamad was saying, this pandemic is upon us, and this is not the last of it. And so there's a lot of different thinking. Think different is really one of the takeouts for me and for us at PICG, because one of the benefits of this has been mental health, and nobody believed that mental health was a serious issue or wanted to do much about it. But actually, from even a business perspective, productivity, mental health is already it is the single biggest, depression is the single biggest source of disability in the world. And then, of course, we have all these issues of global warming, etc. And I think what we also see is, in the context of the challenges that face us, that face business, is the absence of trust. So there was a survey done in the World Economic Forum some years ago, in which it showed that the trust with government is in the low 40 percentiles, and the trust of businesses is around the 50 percentile, which relatively is better, but it tells you what kind of a situation we find ourselves in. And this is, of course, where good governance comes in, and the whole idea of ethics and being able to actually, if you want to mobilize action against challenges like we've seen in China, the command economy does well, but that's not where we want to, go to. So the good governance factor, the idea, what is good governance according to us at PICG? It is about the balance between economic and social priorities. We have, for example, therefore, a very big challenge for our leadership today, right? So if we are looking at an inclusive and greener growth and recovery, it is our leadership that is going to try and navigate us through something which is very different to how they've been doing it in the past. So yes, number one, short-term thinking, which is incentivized by our quarterly accounts, our annual accounts, has to give way to some longer-term thinking, and that is something that is at the heart of setting priorities. So, ESG, environment, societal issues, and governance is, in my view, the new minimum. We have to work with ESG, and we, as a group, as a group of advocates and practitioners, we have to take ESG forward. And I think the incentives for business have to be built around that, as Hamad was describing some of them. So I won't repeat them, but to my mind, one of the most important things for us to be considering right now in Pakistan is that the awareness around the benefits of sustainable and good governance is not fully caught on to. It is still nice to do, tick the box. So I think the need to advocate and communicate and provide that thought leadership is an action that we're doing by having this roundtable, but needs to continue to happen, because the understanding that business is a subset of society, and it can't flourish, and business can't flourish and society thrive. Both those things have to happen in tandem. One can't happen without the other. And I think this platform, the ESG platform, is a very good starting point and a practical springboard. So we need to give it the legal framework that we need to advocate and talk to, whether it's the SECP, whether it's the State Bank of Pakistan, and to further take that to a place where it can be practically executed. And we need to make this into a visible index of sorts, or governance index, or a governance and ESG index needs to be delivered. And we've got to come up with steps that take us there. And of course, tax and other financial incentives can be created. But I think the biggest incentive for business to think about right now is what is already out there, which is, for example, according to recent research, there's been an increase of about 400% in sustainability reporting. So the global trend is sustainability reporting is really, really growing. Now, whether it's authentically happening is the debate, is the challenge. But you have about 80,000 reports that came out last year on sustainability, and it is the case that investors are 80% of the investors are now building ESG into their investment making decision process. So and of course, a very important point is demographics. What is happening is, I think it was Deloitte who did a survey on millennials, and what should business priorities be, and 63% of them responded that improving society was a bigger priority in their minds than generating greater profit. And that was high by about 63%. Plus, another factor that we as business leaders need to be conscious of is that a historic wealth transfer is happening from of about $24 trillion moving from the baby boomers to the millennials. So this, in terms of what we are talking about in terms of what is good for business, is actually good for society, and what is good for society is good for business, is one of the messages we have to convey to our business community. I'd like to just make a couple of more points very quickly. One is that we have a partner here as a global accounting entity, ACCA, social accounting. How do we take social costs and build that into our accounting system? It might sound a little radical, but that is what people are using to allocate resources. So that is something we've got to come up with a unified standard sustainability accounting for ESG. How do you calculate carbon footprints? Because CEOs and directors make decisions based on that, and they will be re-guided to find that right balance between what is environmental and societal and what is good for business, and see how they converge together. Again, a lot of our institutions lack this capacity and competency. That's another area of focus, of how do you actually calculate and develop sustainability matrix. And again, business, government, academia are still not aligned on what corporate sustainability looks like. So that's an area. So I feel like a lot of work needs to be done on alignment. And as a CEO of yesteryears of a company, I would want to know, the world is so changing so fast. What is the materiality of, which aspect of sustainability do I give my attention to? So, we have COVID, we have racism, we have environment, we have poverty. And so how do you link what the business's strength is and what is material to society, and how do you start forging partnerships around them? And my last point is around what, a lot of the academic experts are saying, like Porter and Kramer from Harvard and all. They're talking about creating shared value, where the whole idea is societal issues offer opportunities for business to actually deliver greater value and better results. And it's a competitive advantage for businesses if they are able to do that. They can manage risk better, there's greater innovation. and they attract and retain better employees if you're concerned about society as a whole. And certainly it builds for greater customer loyalty, especially when you recognize that millennials are going to be the big decision makers and part of your. So in Pakistan, a lot of these trends need to be understood, and we can, if we take advantage and prepare and act on this faster, I think we will leapfrog in many ways. So I'll stop here and join the conversation as it goes on. Thank you. Rachel?
Oh, yes, hello. Yeah, definitely, Hassan. Thank you very much. You touched on quite a lot of issues and topics that the pandemic has accelerated, and at ACCA we're definitely working on a lot of things with members about taking more action and setting timelines. We know that all of our members are at different stages and with different dimensions. I'm trying to work towards sustainability. So next, we would like to invite Waqar Hamid, who's head of corporate affairs at Nestle. He's on video, or sorry, he's not on video, I'm afraid, but he's on speaker. So Waqar, can you
guys hear me?
We can.
Okay,
Please
that's
tell us
great.
about what you're doing.
So, my apology for this big technological fuss here. So you can see my face, and I'm sure you can hear my voice. So thank you very much for this kind invitation. And I can already see some good friends and some leaders who are sitting here who've been guiding us as Nestle in Pakistan, and of course be part of our global drive as well, where we can take up this sustainability agenda. And the sustainability has become very, very important when it comes in this new environment, the environment which none of us has seen before. So as SSR just closing his statement by mentioning about creating shared value. So Nestle is among one of the companies who have adopted it almost a decade back. And now we are consider ourselves as one of the companies in advanced stage where we are actually practicing creating shared value. And as a company, we believe that, for us to be successful in long term is by creating value for both our shareholders and for society. So if we do a half job only for shareholders and not do a full job by taking care of our society, it will not really be the full job done. So it requires to take care of the society, and in a way, as explained in creating shared value concept, that you take them along. And the idea is that, if we take an example of a fisherman, we don't catch a fish for him. We try to make him understand how to catch a fish. So give him a more sustainable life. So that's how the mindset at Nestle is, that we work with the communities. And these communities, we make sure that we have all the sustainability mechanisms are placed in our value chain. And so far we always used to talk about creating shared value, which have been very deep rooted in our the way we practice our the way we look at society. So recently Nestle has looking at in a more different way, where we have started calling it sustainability by design as well. So it's very much part of the CSV. But it's only that we are trying to build up certain pillars which can help us more looking into the issues which are more challenging this universe today, whether it is climate change. So we talk about emissions, we talk about how we can reduce the use of fossil fuel across our value chain. Then we talk about sustainable packaging. We all know how big is the challenge of plastics, and we as a big consumer company, we have already given a bigger commitment to make sure that we contribute positively towards the society. And as a company's vision, we believe that that our packaging should not be ending up as the litter in oceans or in any kind of place where we can see the litter as a Nestle packaging. So that's the bigger vision. But as a goal for objective for 2025, what we are looking at now, that all our packaging materials have to be mandatory, have to be recyclable and reusable. And a lot of efforts have been made. There are baby steps have been taken and right steps have been taken towards that side. Similarly, when it comes to water, we have a global initiative where the Pakistan market is the lighthouse for the whole Nestle world, is caring for water. And we are working very closely with one of our speakers here, with Hamad, that is WWF. And this is not only we're looking inward on how to save water in our processes, how to conserve water, how to reuse water, but also looking outside our fence, outside our boundaries, how we can work with our communities, how we can work with our suppliers, how we can work with our farmers. And as we all know, in Pakistan, the bigger challenge when it comes to water is not the industry or the civic use, is agriculture, where 90% of the water is used, and out of which 50% is almost wasted because of lack of right procedure that we follow in agriculture. So it's a very important for a company like Nestle, which is very agrarian company in sense that we buy milk, we buy a lot of raw materials, which comes from the agriculture background, and they all use water. So I think it makes a lot more sense for us to work with our farmers to make sure they use they use water sustainably. And there are a lot of initiatives within this Caring for Water initiative that we work with our partners. And then I think responsible sourcing is another one, which is part of the bigger sustainability design, where we work with our suppliers, industrial suppliers, and the practices that we are following for us, as a next step, we want to take it for them also. So of course, these suppliers, when we look at their operations at the level 1 is there, which means at their own sites, they have to be 100% compliant, 100% compliant to the local laws and to the the policies that Nestle is following. But now in a step 2, they have to go deep down and making sure that the suppliers they are working with, they also have to follow that. So this is more, I would say, sustainability by practice. So it's more like, how we are going green is not only going green by policy, but it's also going green by practice. So making sure that, whether it's inside Nestle, we also making sure that all our partners that we work with, either they are at level 1 or they are in next level, to make sure that we have a similar kind of policies to follow. And I'm grateful to the partners that we have, whether it is LUMS, and I'm really grateful to WWF for continuously partnering with us and engaging at multiple platforms, especially the one which I'm talking about, Caring for Water. So that's really help when you have a like-minded partners. When you know that there are international NGOs and local NGOs who are there to talk to you and help you out to take this to take the next step where you actually contribute back to society. So this is not only help us to fulfill the agenda of creating shared value, because not we are creating value for our communities, but it's also like, we are making sure that we are fully compliant player. And I think Hamad in his opening statement mentioned that this is a bigger challenge for many companies, that especially those who are local. So I think this allow us to become a lighthouse for many of the local companies, that when you are compliant player, you're making sure that you are following the laws, you still remain profitable, because the kind of savings and the trust that you gain from society, that is important for any growing large size company. So any company in Pakistan who wants to grow, it has a larger base for consumers. It is very, very important for them that they create trust, and trust comes with a lot of practices when it comes to on the sustainable practices. And there is nothing better than creating shared value, because there you are going back to the society, going hand in hand, creating profits for your shareholders, but also paying back to the society that you're operating in, making sure that you utilize the resources in a way that those resources are available for next generation as well. So that will be, I would say, this is how we see the green part, how we see the sustainability part for Nestle and for the other industry players. And they are very, very good industry players in the market. So Ehsan Saab been representing for many years. He's a leader for us, representing Unilever. So I think Unilever is another company which is now following creating shared value. And there are many similar likes. So I think we need to build upon all these companies who can work upon that. So with this, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikas, for that statement and about building trust. Sorry to intervene. I'm just conscious of time. I want people to have their say as well. So Ehsan, can we come to you, Ehsan? If you could just have your 5 minutes, and then we'll go to the finance group, which will be Shamoon, Kate, and Babar immediately after Ehsan.
Okay, so thank you. I'll try to do it in less than 5 minutes. I think the way that we see it at Pakistan Business Council and within Pakistan Business Council at the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business is it's all about creating awareness of the impact that your business has in the extended value chain, including, and that I think is probably the most important part, in the consumption part of your value chain. So Waqar mentioned packaging, yeah, and I think he and in my former role at Unilever and most of the FMCG companies in Pakistan would realize that one of the biggest growth drivers are the plastic sachets, and the plastic sachets do litter they litter, full stop. They in Karachi they actually block the drains, and therefore we have flooding and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, whilst using recyclable material is important, I think it's not as good as actually getting involved in recycling itself. So none of the FMCG companies, to the best of my knowledge, and I moved out of that that business directly about 4.5 years ago, have actually got directly involved in collection and recycling. And that's something that would be very important going forward, recognizing the impact that they have within the extended value chain. Up to the point, it's a lot easier to do it with your suppliers. It's much more difficult to do it with your consumers. Yeah, so that's point number one. Point number two is that having got the awareness, then getting the recognition of the role that they can play. And I've just given you an example in the context of recycling. But the recognition part owes itself largely to the culture of the organization, and the culture shapes the vision and the strategy and the kind of people that organization employs and the processes that they adopt. So it's a holistic approach. It's not just about ticking the boxes. The third thing is that having got the responsibility or the recognition of the role is developing the capability. Against that is not something that happens overnight. It takes ages for even well-developed and well-organized global businesses to do that. Plastic is a case in point. I think people have been trying to address the recyclability of plastic for a long time. We made some progress, but I think there's a lot of way to go. So developing that capability and investing in those resources in developing the capability is very important. The next thing is you can't manage something if you don't measure it. And the best way to promote measurement is to start reporting it. So recognizing the acceptable ways of reporting, and a lot of by training. I like to think I've evolved into something slightly more than that. But be that as it may, I think within the financial reporting world, there's still a debate going on how to get better at financial reporting. But in terms of ESG reporting, I think we've just made a start, and I think there's a lot of way to go to recognizing what is an acceptable way to go about consistently reporting the practices of responsibility. And last but not the least, having done all that, is then sustaining the effort, which then again goes back to the culture and the vision and the strategy and the kind of people that you have. So I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, San. Before I hand over to Shamoon and then Babar and then Kate, just before I hand over, my colleague Harun is just going to show the first polling questions to the audience. And if you could show that, Harun, to the audience, the polling question, and that can take place in the background. जितने भी तमाम audience members हैं, kindly आप इस quick poll के select करें online, आपके screens पे अभी आ रहा है, और फिर हम immediately following your answers, हम इनको सारे को consolidate करके आपके साथ share करेंगे, हमारे पास क्या pattern और trend आ रहा है. So that can go on in the background whilst we're having that the polling questions undertaken. Let me ask Shamoon, who's from Tundra, which is a Scandinavian asset management and investor. So Shamoon, can you tell us, when you're looking at countries like Pakistan, you've got a finite fund that has to go into the right places, the best countries, the best companies which are exhibiting ESG. What is it about Pakistan and what isn't about Pakistan that is attracting you or detracting you?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Shamoon, I'll just introduce a brief about the work we do and the company I represent. So I work for a Swedish-based asset management company called Tundra. We invest globally, but one of the fund that we launched in 2015, the world's first frontier market sustainable fund. At that time, there was nobody covering the sustainability of the developing countries such as Pakistan, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and so forth. At that point in time, I was obviously, being a money manager, was a bit skeptical about how sustainability is actually going to make me profitable or my clients profitable. But along the way, when I learned about sustainability, I actually kind of found out that you can actually make more money from sustainable investments rather than the conventional investments. Just to put it in a perspective, one area that is often misunderstood is the difference between the CSR and sustainability. People think that the CSR activities are sustainability, but unfortunately, that's not true. Sustainability is more about investing in your businesses and making sure that the system operates in itself rather than pumping it or stimulating it on and off. For example, if you switch from a fossil fuels grid-based power to a solar, you're actually saving 10 cents per kilowatt hour. But at the same time, you're also helping the environment. If you're having a gender balance, or if you're having a better work environment, you're having a trained, loyal employees who are going to be with you. You would not have a turnover cost. If you have education for all, you'll have skilled labor. If you have a desalination plant, whether it's a textile company or a cement company or any other company, obviously you're going to save costs on the water, which is going to be an expensive commodity in coming period. But at the same time, you'll stop polluting water being finding its way to the ocean. So that's what we have been propagating lately in all the 15, 16 countries that we have invested in. So our investment process comprises of more grading, and then according to different norm-based screening or sector-based screening, and then investing in them, and also guiding the companies how to make their companies more sustainable, or what are the processes that they can implement. So if the company does qualify, or they try to implement those strategies, we remain invested. But if they don't, then unfortunately we have to pull out. And that's the way where the world is moving towards. All the investment managers globally are going to use this criteria. But at the same time, if the companies who perform well on our grading system, on the sustainability, we also help them raising capital. For example, for a Swedish government provides a $10 to $15 million loan to any company who's shift from a fossil fuel to the solar panel. And I, being a vice president of the Swedish Business Council in Pakistan as well, I try to pitch that to the companies. When it comes to the perspective of Pakistan, I think the main issues we have to understand what are the issues and how we can fix it. If I have to jot it down, one is obviously the energy mix. We have still a lot of fossil fuel energy mix. The renewables are negligible. Another is drinking water, water shortage. The third one may be that that would be a skilled labor. We do not have a labor. We still have a very blue-collar labor that we cannot have any industry of sophisticated ICs or where the world is moving, the way China is moving. We have a problem of carbon emissions. So if I have to pick the main 4 issues in Pakistan, these would be the ones. How those could be tackled, there are 2 ways. Obviously, one of my colleagues also mentioned that with government versus councils, think tanks, and the companies. We engage with the governments, but we primarily engage with the companies because we have some stake in those, and using our influence, we try to utilize that. Over the period, we have worked with the Pakistan Stock Exchange, Pakistan Business Council, UNDP. We are working towards launching Pakistan's first sustainable stock exchange, with a lot of efforts by Hassan Saab and UNDP and us and all the stakeholders who were along with us. They are now making the SDG reporting mandatory. For like some of them, there are 17 SDGs. But why is it important for Pakistan to implement those sustainable? First of all, we need it. Pakistan needs it. It's not, you don't have to do it for the fond money. First of all, you have to live in a better life. You can't live with the water that you are provided with or with the air you are provided with. So obviously, I think transforming the government is a tough task, but transforming a company is a much easier task. If each CFO or each CEO tries to implement only one SDG, which are publicly available on the United Nations website, they will start making a change. So they will start reducing the carbon footprint. They'll start using their own water to and not putting burden on the government or crying about there's no clean water and so forth. If they provide skills and education to their employees, they won't be complaining about the turnover or lack of skilled labor and so forth. So I guess Pakistan can actually change a lot if the companies change the way they have been operating. And I guess this is the right forum where I've been told almost 5,000 members of the ACCA who might be looking at it right now or maybe later, but I guess. But right now, the sustainable investment market somewhere around, according to data, is around $3 trillion. So if Pakistan needs to get that money, I guess Pakistan needs to get those tick boxes checked immediately. Otherwise, Pakistan would fall short of it. India and other countries are catching up quite aggressively on that. We were in Vietnam. We were part of launching the Sustainable Stock Exchange. And like Vietnam started very late than Pakistan, so other countries are moving towards that. So you're very right in a limited capital. I think we have to pick and choose. So we will go for the companies who are more long-term sustainable, who have a structural growth story. But that's not just us. I guess everybody, every foreign investment manager is introducing that criteria. And that is one of the reasons I think Pakistan is not, basically it has not been able to attract much of the foreign investment in the last 4 or 5 years. So I guess that is one of the area where we can actually see a lot of honey attraction, so forth. I guess the onus is on the businesses to take.
Great, thanks, Shamoon. Before we move on, Rachel, do we want to look at the results of the polling question now?
Sure, I think that would be really interesting. As you can see, of the respondents, it looks like our panelists are right. We're turning the dial in the right direction, but have a lot further to go. And I think that next we'll move on. Just we've covered so much ground about the role boards can play, about what forward-thinking companies like Nestle are doing. But I do think what we see at ACCA is how the investors are really driving the change, and not just, as Shamoon just said, just on all dimensions of ESG. It goes what the COVID-19 has proved to us. It just doesn't go down to just reducing plastics. It's about including all people in the community to help us all build back better. And companies need to look at all of these things now in order to survive and thrive in this new world. So I think that's Arif, is it not Babar who are going to turn the mic to?
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, Babar, if you want to share your perspective on this, because we spoke last night, and I think some of the things you were saying, especially about family-owned companies as well, was which was quite revealing as well. I think that's important to share. Over to you, Babar.
Thank you. Thank you to the ACCA for organizing this webinar, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel. It's been very informative to hear everyone speak, and thank you. It's a pleasure. I will try to keep this under 5 minutes, but just bear with me if I'm a minute over. So just by way of background, I've been exposed to the different what is ESG today, but in the past, kind of like founded the Green Council over at my boarding school in the early 90s in the UK. In my MBA, I did several courses in what was then called corporate social responsibility, basically, today we've been exposed to the things which form ESG today in terms of the governance, the environment, and sustainability, and it's a little bit of just getting infused with it, kind of like just growing up and seeing the way the family businesses operate. And we looked to embrace ESG, and what I did was about 7 years ago, we put together a presentation on what ICU done, and then I went and I spoke to the chairman of the group and said, look, this is what we've done. Why don't we have a formal ESG program? And we said, okay, let's do this. And the two of us started this, and let all the CEOs in the group know, and we got a team together with an engineer and some other people to take this forward. And the goal was to get all 18 companies in the group to have an ESG scorecard. Why I like this also is one, we do this from the environmental side, but from an investing perspective, we're a large asset manager here, and just like with Shamoon's Tundra Fund, we have an opportunity to guide companies. And so one thing was, look, I mean, if we approach someone, and we did, let's say a cement company, they would be like, you know what, we don't see the benefits, we don't know how to do this, and so on and so forth. But if we've done it in an industrial company such as a paper and board mill, then we can go to them and say, look, this is how we've done it, these are the advantages. We can introduce to the CFO and the team which has implemented this. And we just, so that's the goal. Once we get, we've started doing this now. In terms of governance, I'll just start with that. And, so we're fortunate enough to have one of the first daycare centers in Pakistan in our building. We've been an equal opportunity employer for decades. So we started the ESG program, so it was about 7-8 years ago. At the time when I set up Blackstone Investments, it was about 10 years ago, and all 8 directors were men. And so it was like, okay, we need to change this, so we can't ask someone to leave, so we have to wait until 3 terms are over, and then we had the independents leave. And what we have is, we got 3 women to join, and it took about a year to find the right people. So we have, dare I say, the women are actually quite, perhaps more experienced and valuable than the men on the board. We have Kathleen Kennedy, who was Deputy Governor of the state of Maryland, the eldest daughter of the late Robert Kennedy. We have Gayatri, who works in Morgan Stanley and oversees a $14 billion in LATAM. And we have Roxanne, who was head of private equity at HSBC and co-heads a $12 billion family office. So we have about 40% of the board is women, 50% is independent, and 29% of the senior officers at Laxon Investments are women, including the CFO, head of risk, head of HR, head of marketing, chief research officer. And so, you know, I like to feel that we are embracing this as much as we can, and would love to know how we can take this, do more. On the environment side, like I said, as an observer in board meetings, you know, some of the things I learned that we were doing was, for instance, when it came to water leaving a board mill, right? So what we found was that the water in the neighborhood, so 5 being the worst, the quality of the water in the region, in the area, and this is just a Kasur, was 4 out of 5. And through the effluent system, we were releasing a level 2 and going through that process of cleaning it up. And then another decision which I learned about in the meetings was, instead of having a fiberglass CO2 scrubber, what we went with was a ceramic. Costs a lot more, but you don't waste fiberglass by having to replace those, which is not a good thing for the environment. So, you know, seeing this, where we said, okay, so these are some learnings, and we have it in house, and how do we do this for other companies? One of the things we did was, okay, so we reached out and we looked at, for example, Colgate's global numbers in terms of the balance sheet. And if you pull it up on Bloomberg, you will see the ESG component. And they will say, okay, we're using so many thousands of tons of water, and it is reducing over time. So we've kind of like taken some of those best practices and reached out to those firms who are our partners and started doing that internally. Today, we have about 8 group companies who have a scorecard updated daily, and we're continuing to work with the others to get this implemented. Personally, I'm passionate about the air quality. In Karachi, about 3-4 years ago, I couldn't run anymore in Karachi because the pollution got so bad. You know, a couple of things happened. That happened, and our healthcare fund was in touch with a company called Garden for liquid biopsies. So, you know, they would do a biopsy from here, just take a little bit of blood, and that's it. And so we reached out and we were talking to them, and we said, look, we've got some data from oncologists on where the cancer tends to be in Pakistan. And they said, no, you don't need to do that. We've already looked at it. And they said, it has to be in Karachi. Right? Why? And they're like, well, it's directly related to pollution. And in India, it's in Calcutta was their first one. So that just was a real wake-up call as to the environment is causing cancer. So, you know, what have we done since then? You know, we've got internally done homework. What plants do you need to put in Pakistan to make things reduce the CO2, filters, purifiers, and so, you know, it's measuring PM2 and CO2. And I think the next step is which Ihsan touched upon, was awareness. I think that in the West, what we had was the you know, back in the day, like in the 80s, you had the WWF go to the very large crude carriers and demonstrate, and then wearing their orange clothes, and we all thought they were radicals. And then we've seen that over time, and then we had like, you know, obviously the Exxon Valdez, and then awareness grew, and that awareness today is like Hamad said, is where millennials and are using their income to influence investment decisions. So you can see how it went from there to here. When it comes to Pakistan, where's the awareness which happened? We are going as a corporate to corporate, but really, I think what drives this is the people on the ground who will go and request this. It'll be, you know, if you've seen you've heard about students in colleges, you know, pretty much like not quite a riot, but going and doing demonstrations so that they can't invest in certain companies, and that impacts the company. So I think really what we need is awareness about pollution, so we can start doing something about reducing it. You know, one of the things we can do is, I think the WHO did a paper for Karachi, which was just put water early in the morning, and that will keep the pollution levels down. And we don't do that But I think if we start getting people aware of these things, that'll be really like help. And we continue to do pollution. I mean, we've got coal power plants coming up. Just a few hours after Karachi. I mean, that is just going to be absolutely detrimental and impact all our lives. And we'll live less as a result. But the awareness just isn't there.
I think that's great, Babar. I think
thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. And I think also Waqar touched on that that important note that you made about just the culture. It's the most successful, most sustainable companies will have it embedded across all shareholders, supply chains, stakeholders, employees, customers, and consumers too are becoming more conscious as well. And I think you've all talked about that and that trust. So let's move on to we're very fortunate to have someone from the IFC. So Kate, are you on to talk about what you guys are looking at next?
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much for the invitation to join, and sorry I can't seem to get my video going, so you'll just have my voice. But my name is Kate Lazarus. I'm with the International Finance Corporation. I'm based in now Bangkok, moving from Myanmar, and been working in Pakistan for a number of years. So I lead IFC's ESG advisory across Asia Pacific. And yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. And what I'd like to just touch on in the few minutes that I have is this integration, this environment and social and governance integration. Because for IFC, this as a major investor globally in the region, and of course Pakistan being one of our priority countries in Asia Pacific, we have a lot of activities going on to really look at some of the historical work that we've done on corporate governance, and then ultimately how to mainstream environmental and social issues into that. And in the early 1990s, we were very much focused on just environmental and social dimensions. And when we came into the 2000s, we looked at trying to set standards, and we developed corporate governance assessments, linking them to investments. We started to think about this ESG approach and how this could work for the private sector. And then when we've got into 2011 until today, we're constantly refining and implementing this using our sustainability framework. And one of the things, because it's mentioned earlier, particularly around the attention on environmental and social issues, and I think there was a question on kind of which one is important, more important, but these go quite hand in hand. And for us, what we're really focusing on now, and particularly in Pakistan, is around trying to bring more awareness upstream. So how to get the private sector and also the government to be thinking about these issues much more early in the development space. So even in some cases before individual projects are conceived. We're working in Pakistan, particularly in the Jalampunj watershed, where we have a number of hydropower investments to really look at how these can be managed more sustainably. We're working with NEPRA to look at the methodology for including environmental costs in the tariff. And I think that's something that will address some of this shift and commitment by Pakistan to renewable energy as well, and in the banking sector to build capacity and awareness. So we've had the corporate governance framework that I think most are familiar with, but perhaps are less familiar around the integration of ENS into this methodology. So we've been really working to roll this out over the last few years. So how can companies, make a commitment to address ENS and the G, in terms of best practices, what requirements are needed, for their business strategy? How is the role of the board taking ownership and oversight of environmental and social management systems? What kinds of policies do they have? And particularly, how do you address stakeholder engagement? And what is like this governance of stakeholder engagement? Because stakeholders, can make or break a project. And we see that, of course, across a number of our investment projects in Pakistan as well. So really understanding, who your stakeholders are, you know, how to engage with them, what is the role of the board, do you have the necessary, you know, staff and capacity in place to be able to address the concerns on the ground and really deal with the issues that people are facing on a day-to-day basis. So these kind of stakeholder relations are becoming much more crucial to how, you know, good sustainable investments can take place. I think we know that ESG delivers good, you know, business results. We have enough statistics globally to see that those companies that put more attention on this and think of this early in their development outperform those that don't. And we see from IFC that when we work with companies to improve their corporate governance or improve their ESG practices, you know, there's high client satisfaction in terms of this kind of integration into long-term, you know, business success. So for us, you know, ESG standards are an essential instrument to move clients and markets. It's really, you know, where we need to be today to mobilize private capital. And more you can see adoption of the IFC performance standards or the Equator principles and the like, because we know there's good enough evidence to show that, you know, this lowers risks of harm, increases development impact, that there's actually a positive correlation between high ESG performance and investment returns. And when we speak to our clients, of course, there's strong interest to see the investment returns. And this is really empirically demonstrated. And that ESG standards build confidence among stakeholders for private sector solutions, but very much linking closely to development challenges. And that we can also work to create a level playing field for investors and try to reduce transaction costs, you know, particularly for individual firms. You know, there's a lot of disruption when we think about how environmental and social impacts can cause risk to, say, a financial institution. It can sometimes disrupt operations. It can impact the health and safety of workers, and particularly in this COVID age, you know, IFC has released a couple of COVID-related tip sheets. So happy to share those if you don't have them around, particularly health and safety of workers, labor-related issues, how to conduct stakeholder engagement in this sort of new COVID world, and in particular, whether companies have an emergency preparedness, you know, plans in place. So I think the number one response from commercial banks around integration of environmental and social risks into their sort of governance frameworks is really around reputational risks and negative publicity, which again, we know can make or break a company's operation. So whether environmental issues can become a barrier for your customers or your clients or, you know, who you're working with, these can be, you know, around pollution issues, contamination, you know, failure to do so could lead to loss of contract, impacting your cash flows, ability to repay loans, and, you know, relevant health and safety issues, for example. Some of the social dimensions of this, really looking at, you know, basic human rights needs, land acquisition and involuntary resettlement, the role of indigenous peoples, you know, tribal areas, conflict spaces as well. So we see in Pakistan that ESG awareness has begun to grow among large companies and in the Pakistan market, but still remains limited overall. We're just preparing a kind of maturity matrix to look at where we might be able to support on the advisory side. And we know that the government is attracting a lot of foreign investment as a key priority. And we think that, you know, there'll be an increased demand for stronger ESG practices, as we can see from this webinar today. In 2019, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan issued the Listed Companies Regulation, the code, to replace the Listed Companies Regulation of 2017. So this is really an opportunity also to look at more integration of the ENS part of the code, which is now something that we're working on across the region as well. And Pakistan doesn't have any mandatory requirements related to ESG, so including sustainability reporting. And again, we see that transparency of information and disclosure among companies is really an essential part of, you know, this overall look at how to improve these frameworks. So there are those voluntary CSR guidelines. but more opportunity to look at the code. And we note that it recommends disclosure of board-approved ESG policies as well. We're working a lot also on the sustainable financing. So the banking sector is also quite crucial. Pakistan joined the Sustainable Banking Network in 2015, and the State Bank of Pakistan issued green banking guidelines. We had a webinar in June around like how the banking sector in Pakistan can really look to address COVID-related impacts and what are these impacts that they're facing. So this is another area that will be quite crucial to support, and as mentioned earlier by other speakers, how to really build up that capacity. So we see among companies themselves, there's little adoption of good ESG practices, like among the listed companies. There's a lot of risks to minority shareholders posed by highly concentrated ownerships like families and state-owned companies. So good ESG practices really need to be mainstreamed and really introduced to some of these larger companies more specifically. So I just want to mention that I'll close and just say that this is really high priority. We're looking for further opportunities to expand our work in Pakistan in this area and really hone in more on this integration. We've got an upcoming webinar, I think, with the PBC and Future on the gender-based violence. So this is also another area that's of high priority for IFC going forward, and particularly also around some of these COVID-related guidance that we can help to support. So I'll stop there and happy to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. I think that's a very significant point, and in light of the situation we're in the world, is about aligning the ESG plan, your sustainable solutions with your business strategy, and working with integrating with audit and risk and finance towards sustainable funding. As we talk with members, we all the time about how transparent accounting helps make better, fully informed decisions. And so I think you explained that very well, and probably we'll have a few questions in the Q&A. So we're also so delighted to introduce Samar, and some of the work she's doing on the ground is really truly amazing, and I think very important in order to do what we said is rebuild a more inclusive, greener, sustainable future in Pakistan. So Samar, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay, so I'm audible. So thank you very, very much. I'm actually pretty delighted because everybody over here, it's like talking to people who actually get it. And a lot of my work actually is advocacy. So when Bilal talked about how there is lack of advocacy and there's lack of awareness and there is more need to conduct advocacy on all of the topics that we're discussing today, I completely agree with you. There are so many different things that have been discussed. So I'd be very happy to kind of share what Epiphany is, what we've done so far, and literally in a way, to everybody who's listening in, it is not as difficult as it sounds to start taking the right steps. I think the first step, and we saw some of you already answering the polls and saying that, yes, you are becoming more and more oriented towards this. I think it is easy. It's just the first step that needs to be taken and then another one behind it and so on and so forth. Another person mentioned, I forget now who, but somebody mentioned that there's so many issues to choose from, right? So that was actually the challenge at hand when I started Epiphany more than 3 years ago. I used to work for Karandas, which is an organization dedicated towards financial inclusion in the country. It's very well funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and DFID. So one can argue that I was sitting pretty. I didn't necessarily need to leave my job, but I felt that it was necessary because the amount of impact or the amount of problems that I saw in the impact space were huge. And I thought this was somewhere where I wanted to, dedicate my energies. So Epiphany, if I was to describe it, is a catalyst for impact entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship in the country. And when we started a little more than 3 years ago, we used to keep getting questions, how different is social entrepreneurship? It's not really that different. And, other businesses were quoted as being social enterprises as well. So I think part of my initial work was really building out that narrative that there is a difference between social or impact entrepreneurship and why it is necessary for Pakistan. And of course, like we mentioned, there are so many different societal issues. The way we went about addressing it, so right from the beginning, we realized that we wanted to be geared towards diversity, inclusion, sustainability. So we instituted an SDG-focused acceleration program. There are two versions of it. One is for early stage entrepreneurs, one is for idea to early stage, and one is for growth stage entrepreneurs who really need investment to grow or to scale and grow. And over there, 40 to 50% of our founders who we take into the program are either women-led or else they are co-founders, at least in the business. In terms of how we're tying that back into impact, all of them have to be in line with one or more SDGs. So again, we've just parked our indicators with SDGs very, very closely. The third thing that we're doing is we're very focused on marginalized communities as well. So we've had teams coming in from Sawabi, from Mardan, from Faisalabad, from Lodhra. So not just limiting ourselves to KLI, and then to looking at different socioeconomic backgrounds. So even when they come in, even though the tuition fee is very, very subsidized, making it free of cost for all the women founders to attend, for all the people coming in from differently abled backgrounds, or the ones working for differently abled communities, that has also been a priority for us. In terms of sustainability, another piece that we kind of put into place, there's this initiative called Soni Dharti Climate Years. So WWF, so Hamad is here, this is very interesting. One of the first challenges that we put together was actually relatively simple, right? So what we did was we created a platform and we said anybody and everybody is welcome to join in. You need to form groups of 3, so students and one professor, or students and one faculty member, or an industry person. And why we said 3 is because you need some effort. Usually one person disappears, so at least 2 people stay back to do the work. And the idea was take any climate action. So WWF actually ended up cleaning Turtle Beach and submitting a video as well. So it was really well taken because we asked everybody to submit a 1-minute video. So it created a lot of positive momentum. 26 climate actions were taken in less than 3 weeks. So I think when I talk about how easy it is, I think that's exactly what I meant. There are so many young people, and it's really a matter of capturing the talent. The other piece that we did, there was also this photo competition that we did, where we asked everybody to submit photos depicting the negative impact of climate change in their communities, and this was nationwide again. We received 129 entries, ended up partnering with Marriott and Artgate to depict it like a photo exhibition, followed by an advocacy seminar. So I think all of these things are really, they require energy, they require action, they require you to be able to mobilize the community around you. But I think part of what we were trying to do is not just the advocacy and awareness part, but also the action part. The other piece that we are now working towards is an impact angel investors network. This is also happening organically. A lot of the enterprises that we work with are small. They need small sums of capital to survive. And here again, this is again a great opportunity for investors like IFC, like even the corporate, on the corporate side, right? So part of it is also what needs to happen. And I think what needs to happen in terms of finance is setting up such impact investment funds. They could be corporate led. They could, instead of channeling, let's not say instead of, but maybe let's be a little more innovative. Let's think about how can we support enterprises as opposed to making one-time donations to different causes. And I think that way there is sustainability which is built in, because you're helping somebody survive the capital of debt, and they can still be in line with what your objectives are. So if you're interested in education, give an unrestricted endowment to a school, which is perhaps focused on marginalized communities, or else working with differently abled children, so on and so forth. The other piece that I think is very important to mention over here in terms of governance is policy. So far there is no specific policy for social enterprises. You either have to register as a not-for-profit organization, which is becoming increasingly difficult in Pakistan, or you have to register as a for-profit enterprise, which means technically, even though the work that you're doing is all social, you will not get any tax benefits or incentives for doing that. The other piece that I think is very interesting, what you've been mentioning right now, is there is room for corporate innovation. So literally working with private sector organizations, working directly with entrepreneurs if you can access them, or working through intermediaries like ourselves and introducing, so if there is a challenge of plastic, it's very easy to design a plastathon. There is a water and sanitation hackathon which took place back in July last year with WSSP, which is Water and Sanitation Services Peshawar. The funder was Swiss Development Corporation. And there were a couple of organizations, the Indus Entrepreneurs Islamabad and Epiphany, that put together the entire program and curated it. Again, some tremendous ideas came out, and WSSP directly worked with them. So I think there is room for that. Definitely there is room for ESG knowledge to be disseminated within these enterprises. And there is also a role for ACCA. I mentioned it to RF when we had our first call. Accounting, finance, the operations part of it, small enterprises really struggle a lot. So, you know, you mentioned that there are 40,000 or 40,000 plus people who are training in this area. So again, I think there is room to bridge that particular gap. So, yes, so I would say, you know, from my side, I would just, you know, this is all I have to say, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Samam. It's Jimmy here from ACCA. I'm just going to jump in now, if that's okay. It's so great to follow from you and the kind of, I think the areas that you brought in around really focusing on social diversity, skills, and capacity building through SMEs right through the scale. And I think that's where, for us, absolutely, as you mentioned, we've got a really big role to play. I've been very grateful to work with Arif and colleagues at SERB over the years, looking at these kind of issues, trying to drive them deeper into corporate action, but dealing with all the barriers. And I think, you know, from my side, listening to great contributions so far, maybe there's a couple of additional points that I'd like to bring in. You know, one is the role of the profession. I mean, you know, do we really, to close our eyes and imagine the accountancy world, the role of the accountant in 10, 15 years time? I mean, is it honestly going to look anything like it does today if we are to achieve what we're setting out to achieve? Yeah, really not. It's really going to look very, very different. And, you know, it's going to hopefully still maintain the rigor, the consistency, the balance, and all that it entails that we see from finance side, but bringing in all these other elements and doing it in a much more collaborative ways with different parts of the business, supporting and leading where that's appropriate. You know, it sounds great to say it, but actually, if we bring it back into the real world, you know, we are, as ACCA as an organization, alongside other bodies and others, are really committing to making those concrete steps to support members with training opportunities. We've recently signed up to a charter with others and the UK government that sets out annual milestones which we are aiming to achieve, making updates to our qualification, providing continuous professional development opportunities linked to sustainability, green finance, ESG. So really that's sort of building that base and sort of upping that skill level at a very kind of, in a sense, it's a kind of hygiene level. We should be there already. We're not. This is a catch up. But I think, you know, setting that in the kind of COVID landscape for us, you know, what we're seeing in different parts of the world, and I know from my conversations with Arif as well and others, you know, this is a challenge faced in Pakistan as well. You know, building back from COVID is there is this question. It was raised earlier, I believe, by Baba around skills, job creation. You know, we know the finance teams and others and all of us here today really need to make a commitment to helping grow organizations in these new sectors that we're talking about, in these new areas. So, well, on the one hand, bringing established businesses, family enterprises were mentioned, organizations across the different scales, bringing them up to speed with where they could be with their products and services. Consumption was mentioned as well as an area where, you know, this is also a part of the process. But clearly, hearing from others about where we're going to go, thinking about decarbonization, circular opportunities linked to plastics, air quality was mentioned. There are so many new areas for investment, for building new organizations and new areas of economic activity, which will help us get to where we want to get to on these goals, and in the process, be job creators. So, you know, we're building the resilience, but we're building those kind of green and, I guess, employment opportunities linked, and livelihood opportunities in a sense, linked to sustainability. And, you know, we are very committed as an organization to sort of to upping our skills of our members in this space. And I think, on a final note, linking just back into the whole piece on resilience. I mean, our economies have not been optimized for resilience in any way. And hopefully COVID is the thing that's really going to help us at least think about resilience as a first step. And I hope that the step after that is thinking about all those brilliant things like impact, regeneration, all of those types of areas which we know can come off a really solid foundation. So for me, those kind of areas, I hope sort of add some interesting points to our discussion. But yeah, thanks very much for your vibrant points so far. Arif, shall I hand back over to you at this stage?
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy, for that. Just going around, I think it's important to just take some of the questions first before I open it up to anybody who wants to take a deeper dive into anything. So just looking at the questions from the audience, there are some we've flagged up here to have a look at. One question comes from Mohammed Imran, who's listening in, and Mohammed Imran says, need to have a push for from the government. So obviously thinking about some sort of regulation, SECP or PSX on regulations regarding reporting on ESG. I think that was mentioned by Hassan. There doesn't seem to be a clear-cut standard as we have with financial reporting on ESG reporting. Once business is required to produce a report, it will help move towards better management, availability of information for investors, community as quoted by Ehsan Jamil and by Ihsan Malik as well. So I think that's a statement. We do need that. I think there's been a reluctance on the part of the stakeholders to actually move towards mandating ESG reporting. Anybody want to jump in? Do we still feel that way as a business community, that we're still committed to doing this voluntarily rather than mandating it?
Can I jump in there, Arif?
Yeah. Just go ahead.
I believe at this stage of evolution that we happen to be in, I think voluntary approach for a limited time is probably the right approach. We've had in the past several other measures, however well intended, thrust down the throats of a business in particular, and the business has reacted. I think there are at least 5 or 6 large companies that have adopted very responsible reporting practices. But even if you look at those, they are not exactly the same. They are not uniform. Maybe they are appropriate to their own industries. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve that we need to go through. So that was one observation. The other observation was that PSX is yet not a sustainable stock exchange. It's not a member of the Association of Sustainable Stock Exchanges. So the PSX has also got to come, a little bit further down the line. I believe under the new leadership, and by the way, PSX is a member of PBC. I believe there is commitment to go in that direction, but again, it may take a little time to do that. There are clearly other priorities that they also need to address, or the new CEO needs to address. So I think we need to give him a little bit of time. That's what I wanted to say.
Anybody have an opposing view? Hamad and then Babar.
Okay, Arif, I mean, the thing is that last more than 2 decades, I've worked very closely with the industrial associations, chambers, private sector, as member of all those committees. Now, let me say this very honestly, that in many respects, government has been supportive. Supportive in the sense that a very consultative process was followed when the rules, regulations, and the compliance mechanism was being developed. All the feedback which we received from the private sector was incorporated. The principles like the polluter pays principle, extended producer responsibility, all those principles were kind of incorporated. Now, and then there was also incentives to go for wastewater treatment plants, to have scrubbers to improve the emissions, waste management. But unfortunately, the private sector, the local private sector in particular, always, they come up with one excuse or the other just to ensure that they do not make investment. The problem is that as part of the feasibility studies, sustainability is never incorporated. I mean, these kind of costs are never part of the feasibility studies. Environmental impact assessments for a new project or for even an existing project has never been taken as a planning tool. It was always taken as a formality. Oh, there will be another inspector, we'll give an envelope and the inspector will go and everything will be all right. So I think if there is that mindset, and then you remember the voluntary, when we wanted the companies to report their sustainability performance along with the financial performance, the feedback was, oh, we don't have the capacity. There was a series of trainings for people, for accountants, for people working on their communication teams. They were good quality reports started coming. The companies started following GRI guidelines. But then what? So I think we need, literally, it's not about balance between carrot and stick. We have seen a lot of carrots. I think the COVID-19 and this crisis, it also requires some real stick, unfortunately.
Yeah, so you're in favor, the stick means mandating things and monitoring it and retribution after that. Babar, you wanted to say something, or was it Shamoon? Who had their hand up to? Yeah, Babar. You're on mute, Babar.
Sorry. I just want to look. I think that reporting is very good, and I'd like to echo what Essen said, which is it should not be a mandatory requirement. I'm not aware that the NASDAQ, the NYSE, which are collectively bigger than every other stock exchange on the planet a couple of times over, do not require this. This, as I mentioned earlier, is led by awareness. It's the people. I think we need to work on the awareness, and then people will make the decisions. To ask a corporation just to report, what good is that? I mean, who's looking at that report? And it's just going to be people teaching you how to do it, and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg for, it's going to cost a decent amount for the whole thing. And for what? I mean, are people paying attention to it? What is the point in just reporting it for the sake of reporting it? I think I really feel that we need to make people, the citizens of Pakistan, aware of what corporations are doing, and then that would make that move like it has, I think, with the rest of the world.
Arif, sorry, just a clarification. I never meant that the reporting should be mandatory. I said the compliance of environmental and social rules and regulations related to decent work, related to the emissions and effluents. That should be, I think, a lot of voluntary steps have been taken. That should be now mandatory.
And reporting in terms of measuring performance doesn't have to be made public. The point is, integrated thinking actually should drive internal reporting. So as long as management is aware that that these things are important for our survival, and they're looking at this internally to drive decision making, that's sufficient for now. But we don't have any calibration to sort of gauge whether this is going on internally. So there's a bit of. Let me take some more questions. And please just
Can I quickly add something here, Arif?
Yeah, go ahead, Summer.
Okay, so how CSR, a lot of times CSR budget has been used as a marketing tactic. So perhaps there is room actually to put a twist on it. So literally, if certain companies who are actually complying, with SDGs, it is a matter of featuring them and reporting them and making a lot of noise around it. Featuring it in Tribune, for instance, or wherever. And then suddenly, before we know it, the others will want to. There'll be peer pressure, right? So in a way, I'm saying that maybe there is positive momentum that can be created by making a specific push towards, okay, what have you done for SDGs, and designing a nice campaign around it.
So, Saba, can I add that if you go on the PBC website, you will find a number of case studies where our members have adopted these practices, and we found ways to showcase those.
And I think just to say a little bit, Jimmy can come in. I mean, ACCA has been advocating a long time now for integrated reporting, which is about, really corporate leadership and management sort of understanding the interconnectivity between, ESG as well as shareholder value. I think materiality was mentioned by Essen right at the beginning, that if organizations can appreciate exactly which of the various capitals, whether they're natural capital, whether it's human capital, whether it's intellectual capital, which of those capitals are really being materially affected by business operations, then they can begin to connect that up with shareholder value. So I think a lot of capacity building still needs to go on. One of the questions coming in, the banking sector needs to be more involved in the ES sector. State Bank has come out with the green banking guidelines, but more incentives needs to be given. Any ideas on how we do this? So I think that's from Yavar Herikar, who's really asking, what are the incentives we can give to corporate leaders to deliver on ESG? We know all the KPIs and the incentives linked with achieving profits, and we give bonuses, we give salary increases. How do we measure managerial performance on ESG and reward them for doing that?
Can I jump in again? Look, I really feel that this is not an incentive or a reporting-led requirement. This really has to be the company taking the initiative, the management, the employees. It has to go like that, the way it has in the rest of the planet. There cannot be a carrot for you for doing this. It has to be awareness-led. Like Shamoon said, they vote for buying a stock based on them being ESG. That is the way I think it has to be. To then give a management an incentive, to have them have reporting requirements. I mean, to me, that's just ludicrous, because it's nice to talk about, but putting that in effect when everybody else has gone the route of awareness and that push, no, those are just my thoughts.
So no carrot or stick. Essen.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in. So, I feel like, this is a situation that we find ourselves in, which is quite urgent. And I think if anything, that sort of leapt out at me from the COVID experience. And my sense is whether formal incentives versus, what the market is incentivizing as a change, what are the ways in which that can be accelerated? What is the way in which this level of awareness that drives business to see its fortunes linked with this practice certainly needs to be accelerated. And there is that old saying of fake it till you make it. So I'm not sure whether the absence, when you have to do something and you do it and you actually end up building some capacity. I don't see it as a single solution, but I feel like there needs to be a certain amount of incentive, certain amount of mandatory, but what those need to be at this stage needs to be carefully thought about. And the capacity that people build, and even writing out these reports gives them the language, other people get onto it. And of course, ultimately, we understand that the genuine investor drive to only invest in organizations that are in fact doing this will catch up. So I feel like this is not something you can leave to the market or natural evolution. We're in a situation where active and finally thought about, don't want to hit kill an ant with a bomb, but certainly need to put in some laws that motivate and incentivize. And I think that there is a carrot and stick, when used badly, is a terrible thing, but there is a place for it. And I wonder whether this debate needs to be continued for what would be advantageous, what phase end of development are we at where certain things, need to happen? I mean, I understand that, we can ask for taxes and taxes won't come through if people don't believe that paying their taxes helps, helps them or helps the country or helps society. But at the same time, that law is there.
So whilst I got you all online, that we intended this to be a series of 3 roundtables, and just to take people's comments on what the next roundtable should really touch upon.
I think identifying the areas where actually you can implement sustainability. I guess that is the real question. I think I'm hearing about the reporting and stuff. What are you going to report about? Are you going to report that, yes, we went to the village and there were so many people without clothes and take some pictures? That's not ESG. Maybe a good headline would be, yes, we shifted our power from grid, 20% of that to solar. Or maybe we educated, we sent 10 women or 20 employees for high skill labor or training and these kind of things. Maybe we put a desalination plant at Karachi Electric so that they could supply water to the Karachi. So I think these things are not that difficult. It's like unfortunately, Pakistan and many of the foreign countries, that we don't have to single out Pakistan in that aspect. I think it's more of a buzzword, unless you implement it. I guess implementation of it, and even if you start with one of it, it's not that difficult. If cement plants can have a captive power plants on a coal base, they could have 20% on the solar. But the point is, they do not have much awareness. B, they do not have any incentive. So I guess the ecosystem needs to be created, but I guess someone needs to start, maybe from the bottom up or from the top down, and we meet in the middle. So I think some more practical steps would make more sense.
So can I quickly add something? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ahmad.
No, my apologies. I just have to leave in like 2 minutes time. I have another commitment. So maybe talking about the next webinar, I think adding to what Shamoon said, let's talk about the solutions. What are the nature-based solutions? What are the opportunities for having energy efficiency or renewable energy? What are the different opportunities as part of circular economy, waste management, sustainable infrastructure? So, and we can come up with a list, and we can come up with, real life examples, both from within the country and the region, where such investments yielded good results. And obviously, my last point, look, government, financial institutes, NGOs like WWF, private sector. Now, not a single sector can address this challenge alone. I fully endorse that. It's such a huge challenge, particularly in a country like Pakistan, where even when the government starts the green stimulus initiatives, they just build upon this. So it needs collective action, period. It needs strong partnerships at all levels. And I think each one of us need to identify those opportunities where we collaborate, where we find synergies, and then, try to take this forward. Otherwise, I've seen like last 25 years, unfortunately, I'm a very optimistic fellow, but unfortunately, the real change is not very common. Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly add something, right? So in a way, sometimes it's easier to link it back to the benefit that you're going to get. So for instance, if we talked about energy efficiency for a quick second, right? JICA has been working very, very closely and working very hard on the energy efficiency piece with NICA. Now, obviously, it is in the interest of businesses to adopt energy efficient policies. What do those mean? How can other people, where can you purchase energy efficient solutions? How can you kickstart the industry if it's not there already? I think, finding examples like that. So that's one. and then really shouting about it. So I agree with Babar when he says there is awareness which is required, right? So one does it, the other one wants to follow through. You report on how much money you've saved. You talk about how much cost efficiency you created. Perhaps that ties into what Yavar was asking, right? Maybe that becomes the incentive at the organization that, okay, this person has saved the company so much money. The other piece, so I saw somebody from Sapphire Mills, I'm not sure if they're there anymore. We were doing a campaign on fast fashion for Sony 30 climate years. And we realized that some of the brands, the clothing brands, there are 14 collections that come out every year, right? Minimum of 14 collections or so. We can reduce the collections. You know how Sapphire took charge and they created the bags. They created these bags in which you could, purchase and stuff, newspaper bags. Similarly, again, this is something which one of them can drive, right? And say, okay, one of the collections, we're skipping it and we're actually doing recycle. Come drop your clothes back. And we're going to do upcycling, for instance. And again, it has this huge momentum that can get created. And people will want to buy things which become trendy. This is something, again, which we keep seeing, right? So anyway.
So Samar, I just want to add, Swedish Business Council, we along with the Swedish Embassy are actually organizing a sustainable fashion show. And that is on the theme of having a biodegradable fabric and at the same time utilizing the used clothes, basically. So we are exactly working on that. And I guess, yeah, that's something that would definitely get some buzz more.
So amongst our membership, we've got excellent examples of companies that have adopted very responsible practices, be it in fashion, trade, and beyond. And if you wanted to, I'm sure they'll be very delighted to come and showcase their. And there's a lot of work that's already been done putting it together. So it's not as though they'll have to go specially out to just develop something for a forum. So we can certainly participate in that.
And for the last for 15 years, ACCA collaborated with WWF on the sustainability awards in Pakistan. We went from 2 companies entering back in 2002, and we ended that particular initiative in 2016, and we had about 70 companies at that time submitting a sustainability report in one format or another. I think there's an alphabet soup of reporting standards out there, so nobody knows what to pick and choose. Is it GRI? Is it SASB? Is it some other format to adopt? So really, as in the accounting profession and financial reporting, there's now a convergence towards IFRS, and everybody knows that they have to report on IFRS. There's still a huge cloud of ambiguity on what you should be reporting on when it comes to ESG. So I think there needs to be some sort of standardization. Normally, the standardization comes through a mandate. A report using GRI, full stop. But that hasn't happened so far. So I think there's a little bit of rationalization that has to go on. I have heard there's talks of consolidation between GRI and SASB. So that may be happening in the background. But there has to be some sort of convergence happening as well. To end off with, before Rachel, would you like to say a few words? And I'll just end off with saying, look, it's been extremely valuable. I know there are lots of doubts and lots of questions that remain unanswered. And when we Pakistanis close our eyes and we see the images of all the pollution in our cities, and we see the poverty and the inequality, and we think, this challenge is enormous, but it starts, like I said, a lot of people have said it starts at an individual level, it starts at an institutional level, and I think, what we have seen is, there are shared values amongst the people here. These collaborators here in this forum have to go and change the minds of the detractors as well, because it is about survival. It is about our futures. So I'll just end there, and thank everybody. I've been taking some screenshots as we've been going along. If others can add their videos as well, I can take a bigger screenshot. Over to you, Rachel. Would you like to say some closing words?
Sure, I would just echo everything you've said, and really like to thank all the panelists for their fantastic contributions today. I think there's so much rich food for thought here to take away, and I hope, if anything, it's inspired our guest members to go back and think about how they can make a difference. I think the Build Back Better does sound a bit like a slogan, but it really is a acronym for catastrophe insurance companies that they've used for years, and it really is all about collaboration and togetherness. And I think in Pakistan, it's very clear we're at a stage right now, as Hassan said, it is urgent. And whether it's about inspiring in local communities and getting that momentum to make a difference with water and pollution and getting clothes on people's backs, but all the way up to the Unilevers and the Nestle's, leading by example. And I do think that there's a lot of interesting input today about what public policy and where it should move forward. And like Haman said, when we talk about solutions the next time, it would be great to get some of these policymakers on the forum to give their 2 cents and to talk about what they're doing to incentivize companies and how they're working with all of the shareholders and stakeholders in this system. This has given us, COVID has given us a major opportunity to reform the financial system. And I think in some ways it was almost waiting to be reset, something big to help make it change and modernize and update it to make sure it's doing what we all really want it to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. I just want to thank the audience. We've got lots of questions that have come up, some we haven't answered. But what we'll do is we'll come up with a draft sort of call to action that I'll circulate to our collaborators, PICG, PBC, SERB. We'll sort of distill that into a meaningful call to action, and then I'll circulate that to the other members of this particular round table to get their sort of sign-offs and their comments, and hopefully then we can decide what we do with that call to action, not only following this roundtable, but the other 2 that will follow this as well. So great, thank you all very, very much for joining us. Thank you to the audience. Great, Khudafis everybody, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Khudafis.
Bye-bye.
Khudafis ji.